Hey, this is Pastor Tom. Let's make some observations on Ecclesiastes 11 to help us study this text this week. The first two verses start with two commands: cast your bread and give a portion. After each command, a reason is given: for you will find it, and for you do not know. Already we have our first question. What is it that Solomon is telling us to do? Casting bread upon the waters to have it returned to us doesn't make much sense if taken literally. Verse 3 connects to the prior verse with the word earth. And so verse 3 might be illustrating the truth that you do not know when disaster may happen on earth, rain and trees fall, something outside of human control. Verse 4 is one reaction a farmer might have to not knowing what will happen on the earth. He fails to plant and to reap. Verse 5 has an illustration from a pregnant woman, and again we find the phrase, you do not know. Verse 6 has two commands, paralleling the two commands in verses 1 and 2. Sow your seed, and withhold not your hand. And for the fourth time, the phrase, you do not know, is used. And so the first 6 verses illustrate for us our ignorance of life and the world. And yet this should not keep us from wise actions. I'll summarize these verses as, accept risk and keep trying. Verse 7 gives us an example of good, light. This may be a way of describing being alive, because verse 8 has a command to rejoice in all the years one lives. And there is a contrast to light in the phrase about the coming days of darkness. Verse 9 again has the command to rejoice. The person being commanded is a young man. And the words youth is then used 3 times. But in contrast to the 4 times in the first 6 verses where we are reminded that we do not know what will happen, here in these verses we are told to remember that the days of darkness will be many, and that we do know that for all these things, God will bring us into judgment. Twice in these verses, the word vanity is used. And we remember that the word for vanity is breath. All that comes is a breath. And the dawn of life is a breath. So a second question to think about is why Solomon commands us to enjoy life even though we know judgment is coming. How can we enjoy life knowing we will be judged? So I'll summarize these verses as a command to enjoy our brief life, but to remember the coming judgment. Thanks for joining me. God's blessings on your week.